Now, this is a text I've taken from an unpublished course of mine, which is for A1 level. I will use this for A1. And you might see it's not necessarily the simplest of text, because it doesn't have to be. And here's a few strategies for you to deal with any text out there. And keep in mind, this is just a masterclass. I have 40 minutes to present something that actually takes a couple of weeks for you to feel familiar with. I teach all these techniques in my courses, and so that everything comes to you bit by bit, piece by piece, because my aim is to enable you to become an autonomous learner. I don't just want to feed you and entertain you and want you to consume things. I want you to work, because that's the only way that you will become independent and will actually enjoy your learning process in the long run. Now, if I look at similarities, maybe you can see words here that you already know. I walk you through a few. Well, ist, if you are an English speaker, which I assume, ist looks like is in English. So I can assume, is Monday, Montag. That's also dual. So is Monday, so maybe it is Monday in Berlin. You got the first sentence. There is not much more information there. Schöner and Morgen we look at later. So son could be my son, but it's not about a boy. So we're talking about a Monday. And shined, if you hear it, it sounds like shinen, to shine. So what is shining? My sun is not shining, for sure not. But the sun with the U is shining. So you play around a little bit with the O and see what it could be. Simone Tesch, you hopefully recognize that Simone is first name. If you're Italian, you might think it's a man, but the rest of the world might think it is a woman, which it is in German. Tesch is very likely then your family name. Bureau, Federal Bureau of Investigations, right? So it's a bureau, it's an office, it's an agency, it could be an agency, but office agency, good enough for me. So Simone Tesch has something to do with an agency or with an office. Gibt, you will learn the B in German is a V in English, and so on. So in my courses, I would teach you how to recognize such words. And these words make already 46% of the text. So, our aim is to reach a percentage from which onwards we can read the text and enjoy it. And we are already at 46 if we know how to decipher, how to make the connection between the German word and the English word. And that's a beautiful discovery. It's actually very enjoyable. Yeah, of course, at this point, you still have very little understanding. There is false friends, like if you look in line 3 at the end, as gibt. So it has nothing to do with to give here. I'll look at that sentence later on again. And here, down here in the second to last line in the middle, so ein Mist. This mist, of course, has nothing to do with the mist in London. That's so popular. It's actually the opposite. It is something very smelly. It's manure. But you learn with these, yeah? And if you realize you make that mistake once, you go to Germany and it's misty and you say, oh, so ein Mist. And then people will ask, what's wrong? Yeah. Yeah. And you just wanted to say something nice about the mist. Good. Next thing you look at is context. So once you have a little bit of information, maybe you can figure something out. So it's a Monday, and then you have morgen, and somehow more reminds you of morning. There's a G in there as well. So Monday, a word that is connected to Monday or any day, morning makes perfect sense. Well, the Bäumen you can ignore, that makes no sense. But Simone is Privatdetektivin, so private detective. So Simone is a private detective von Beruf, and you might have heard Beruf before, but by trade, by profession. Yeah, that's something you could figure out. And as you know, she's a private detective. You see in the fourth line from the bottom, Simone and Stefan, they do something. So what do they do? Yeah, maybe, if they are private detectives, they are working on cases. Whether you see Fall, you might have seen Fall in your German classes because nominative, dative, or Akkusativ, Genitiv. These are Fälle as well, also cases. So all these things you can figure out. Yeah, and of course you need more time and you need a bit of guidance, which is what I am there for. The next important step is patience. Yeah, and that's the hardest for many, because our minds always want to understand everything right away. And that causes trouble, because you will be frustrated because it will not happen anytime soon. So you need to refrain from looking up words immediately. You actually have to work with the text. Like you have to work it like a dough. You have to really net it, yeah, so it gets really nice, smooth. You read the text 2 to 3 times. Yeah, in Smarter German, you possibly even read it more often, but in different ways, so it doesn't get boring. But it's not done by just reading a page once. This is work. You're learning a language. It's not for joy. The joy is a positive side effect if you do it right. And the moment you actually are allowed to look words up, I strongly suggest you limit the number of words you look up. Let's say you read Harry Potter in German because you know it inside out. Some people say they don't want to do that because they know Harry Potter inside out and then they already guess what everything means. Depends a little bit on your level. You can also take a completely new book, but limit the number of words you look up to 5 or 7. Because if you look up 20 words in a dictionary, might be, hopefully it's not a paper dictionary, it gets boring. And just looking words up also makes things difficult, because what do you do with the looked up words? You can just look them up, but then you find yourself maybe looking up the same word again and again and again. So better have a system for looking words up. And I show you a beautiful tool later and promise you an even better tool after that. So stay tuned. If you look something up, the most important part of every text or sentence is the verb. Not always, but in 90 to 95% of the cases. The verb gives away what's happening. And you, first thing, if you come into a room and the mood is down, you ask what happened. Not who are you, unless it's a person there who you haven't seen before. So the verbs are important, and you can figure out what the verbs are with a bit of experience by looking at the endings and the position, for example. Yeah. Well, here with zwitschern, that's a bit tricky, but zwitschern, funny enough, if you read it almost from the right to the left, it gets twit. Yeah, twitcher, something like that. It even sounds like twitch. Well, the Z is a T. So it is Twitter, to Twitter. That's where it comes from. And who is twittering in this world? Not Donald Trump, in animal world. Yeah. So the birds. So you would expect the birds to appear somewhere, and very likely you have already found it. So verbs are key words, and there's of course other words that might be left that you still want to look up. So if you looked up the yellow words and the other ones, we would have 12 words to look up. It's quite a lot. I'm not sure whether I would look up the keywords in this, because Vögel you can figure out from context, and the rest is not that important. You do not need to understand every single word, and you do not need to remember everything you look up. Now, of course, you want to improve your skills, and you want to read with less effort and struggle, and that requires that you train. All these words that you figure out here, the ones you figure out easily, like morgen, you will not forget that. Guten Morgen, if you're in Germany, you hear that every day. Yeah, that's something I wouldn't even bother with learning anymore. But let's say you want to learn Beruf, because there's many words with Beruf in German, and it's not an easy word to remember necessarily. Or Fleck in the third last line at the end, Kaffeefleck, it's green. So you need to have a system to actually memorize that. And the best system out there is using, for now, is using a vocab trainer together with, of course, a thought-through approach to language learning, which Smarter German provides at least. And a vocab trainer could be Memrise, could be Anki. There's many of those, and I will let you know why Memrise is my favorite for now. Yeah, in a minute. vocab trainers have an advantage that they take care of repetition. Don't write vocabulary in a notebook anymore or on paper flashcards. Please don't. Yeah, it was good before the computer existed, but now it exists. As I said before, try to focus on the verbs because they already let you know what's happening, and that puts you at ease. If you know what's happening, the rest you figure out as you go. And you see here, there is a couple of frequent words. I've highlighted them, yellow, red. And 5 words here, ein, sie, das, es, sie, ihr. Das, of course, is representative for die and den and das. Yeah, so let's see it like this, because the translation is always the same. It's always the. So if you learn these 5 words, let's say it's 5, you already know 57% of the text. In addition to the 40-something% we have from the beginning, yeah, we are already 90, we are over 100%. So it's very likely an overlap here. But you see how easy it is to at least get the frequent words out of the way. But what I mean by this is not that you learn a list of the top 1,000 most frequent words in German. While that seems a logical approach, it's rather not, because there's downsides to that. We can talk about this in the Q&A. Yeah, this is not what I mean. You look at a text and you see what are the words that come again and again. And those are the interesting ones. And once you've learned them on the next page, I'm pretty sure that these words will appear in a similar frequency. Now then there is sentences like this one. Es gibt viel zu tun. You try to translate it. You look it up, like every word of it. Yeah, it gives a lot to do. You might get that, yeah, because I've heard that, I think in England or in the States, they say, hey, what gives? Yeah, but that's very colloquial. You might not be familiar with it. So, and what this means here, you look it up, maybe there is a lot to do. So es gibt means there is, and it takes a little bit for you to take this in because you cannot directly make sense of it. But you see it a few more times, you might be able to get this. But by letting go, I simply mean, except that certain constructions, or construction is the best word for it, take time. And that means don't force things. Use a notebook, which I call the mind-pleasing notebook, in which you write these difficult constructions or difficult words. Let's say Beruf is something that really doesn't get into your head. And then you have it in your notebook and your mind is at ease. Yes, I've taken care of it. It's somewhere in the notebook. I can look it up anytime, even though you don't have to do this at all. But maybe you look it up in a month and you see, I skipped, God, so easy. And initially you thought, I'm never going to get that. Your comprehension will increase as you go, if you let go. And it's one of the hardest things to do.